You may be familiar with a concept called the gig economy. Now, this increasingly popular term relates to the idea that more and more people are working in gigs rather than in traditional full-time roles. Now, the idea behind this is to have more control and flexibility around your own working hours and such, and yet people don't seem to understand that the level of protection that is afforded to them drops below that of employee status. The awareness of worker status is something that we as a project are seeking to resolve. Employees have the highest level of protection within worker status, yet independent contractors are left with a much lower level of protection, and they have considerably less stability within their roles. The desire for flexibility, coupled with an imbalanced negotiating power, means that those who follow the path of independence are left sacrificing rights and protection in order to achieve flexible hours. And even though people are choosing to follow flexible paths and have their own hours, they find that they fail to meet their initial aims as they find themselves working overtime and have much less time for family balance and work-life balance. For example, over Christmas, delivery drivers for many companies found themselves with only minutes with their families over the festive period, despite working in roles that supposedly promote flexibility and working your own hours. However, it's not only independent contractors who find themselves with no free time. Employees, with the level of increase of technology in the workplace, means that people find themselves working in this 24-hour culture. This workaholic culture is something that we are all guilty of succumbing to. While some people might find that having their emails on their phone and taking work calls outside of the office is something that suits them, I know there will be so many people who dread having work calls outside of office hours. And those who are in more senior roles may find that they have opted out of the statutory working week in their contracts, but many people are unaware that such a statute even exists. You have protection through the law. Why is it so normalized that we make no time for ourselves and work 24/7? We succumb to this workaholic culture that is increasingly popular in modern day life, yet it fails to find the balance that a modern day family needs. Why do we find that we have to work constantly in order to achieve our aims, yet feel like we can't have it all and have a family and a good career? While you may not know what your worker status is at the minute, by finding out, you can have the potential to save yourself a lot of hassle in the future. These are the reasons why you need to know your rights.
As I'm sure many of you are aware, it can be very difficult to find a work-life balance in the 24/7 culture. Family life is something that many prioritise, but there is lacking realisation of its legal basis. The right to even have a private and family life comes from the Human Rights Act, and ability to exercise that right depends upon adherence to legal formalities. So what are these? These are the rules sitting behind the rules. Like when you're in school and the rule is no cheating. It means no copying, no plagiarism, etc. It's just the same when getting married, for example. You must give notice, have capacity, give consent, although you probably shouldn't be thinking about cheating when you stood at the altar. The same goes for divorce, wills and probate, parental leave, child welfare. All have these bodies of legal formality, which is where people trip up. The law must adapt to societal change, but it can be difficult for policymakers to keep pace with the rate of development. This leaves areas of the law crying out for action. Take divorce, for example. It's gone unreformed for years despite clear public need. This is because of government preoccupation with political agendas, which saw the recent bill fail due to lack of parliamentary time. This has left the law remaining to be confusing, discriminatory, and hostile. Look at cohabitation as another example. This receives lacking legal recognition despite being the fastest growing family type. This leaves couples having to jump through costly administrative hoops to gain access to rights over property, finance, and children. These barricades leave so many people without access to any rights at all. So what can we do to change this? Part of our initiative is about shaping young minds, including our own, to be the next generation of forward-thinking lawyers. Throughout my volunteer work, many things have stood out to me as impractical and needing action. And tracing these things back to their roots has led me to one conclusion. The disconnection between the law and the everyday person leads to misapplication and divergence. As a law student with so much appreciation for the legal system, this is really difficult for me to see, and it's why I want to diversify the law. So my proposition to you is that we collaborate in making lawmaking something for everybody to participate in, and something that supports our community. In contrast, there's been areas of action that have had lacking effect. The government spent £1.5 million raising awareness of shared parental leave, yet only 50% of the population have even heard of it. I'm sure many of you here today can think of alternative ways to use these resources, and these would have a bigger impact. But without the backing from legislators, it's so hard for individuals to act. The benefit of knowing your rights regarding family life and family-friendly working is gaining access to full entitlement. Following these legal formalities ensures any arrangements you make are legitimate, and this knowledge, backed with valid use of policy, helps to avoid vulnerability. And this is why you need to know your rights.
My incredible sociology teacher once read out a quote in class to me. Some of you may have heard this quote. It reads, "Knowledge is power." Once studying law, I didn't realise the power of this quote. I really can't stress enough the importance of knowing your legal rights and knowing what support is out there for yourselves and your community. So I've been to India recently doing some aid work, and one thing that I gained from being in India was that it opened my eyes to the lack of knowledge between some of the members of the societies that I worked with and their knowledge on the law and their rights. It was brought to my attention that they obviously weren't fully aware of some areas of the law. And that knowledge that I gained from India really inspired me to help contribute back in my own home in the UK, albeit on a smaller scale, to try and make a change, to try and give people the knowledge on the law and inspire them to look for the rights. As a law student, I can even find the law sometimes really difficult to navigate, so I can't imagine what it's like for people who have never even studied law and let alone read a statute book. So with this in mind, collectively, the four of us, we went about setting up the Chester Community Law Project to help spread some knowledge on the law in hoping of making it more accessible by going into community groups and educating them on how to apply for legal funding and what it can cover. Despite legal aid cuts in some areas, for the areas that do remain, you might even be entitled to legal aid. So it's important to research about it and obviously look for the projects or look for the law clinics in your local area which offer this help. Because you do have the right to legal representation, so why not apply through legal aid? I wanted to find out a bit more information about other types of people in our communities who found the law inaccessible and lacking in diversity, such as adults at risk. Speaking to professionals who work directly through the Care Act, in particular Section 42, it was agreed that this has been one of the biggest changes in legislation in over 60 years. It really strives to push diversity in this area of the law, and it's one of the biggest laws that really push people to live independently, and also there is state intervention if necessary, and an example of how the law is changed to spread diversity between communities. Talking to other local authorities, in particular the police force has independent advisory groups. I'm not sure if people have heard of those before, but the groups are made of members of the public who voice personal experiences about their communities or even other communities that they've experienced. In the event of an incident with a police matter, the knowledge from the IAGs that the police have gained, it affects their approach in a situation, which ensures fair policing service to everyone, with the goal of ensuring diversity in the communities and members of society from a wide range of background and heritage. So, reflecting on what I've just talked about, the underlying principle to address the deficit in diversity in the law is using the resources and information out there available to you and knowing where the support is and how to find it. So, like I said, knowledge is power, and this is why you need to know your rights.
I want to discuss diversity in relation to education. I believe that promoting diversity in education is beneficial for both teachers and students. I myself have witnessed this firsthand. I teach dance on a voluntary basis to children from different ethnic minority backgrounds. And in primary school, I grew up with a child who had autism, and to be honest, it was the best thing. So why do I want to discuss education? Well, education is the foundation to most of our future career paths. And as a young girl myself, I always used to say to my dad, he'd sit at his laptop and he's always working, and I'd say, Dad, why are you always working? And he'd say, well, the world never stops learning, so why should I? That said, at the age of 9, I didn't really feel like doing the extra homework. But, you know, increasing my awareness as I've grown older, I've really understood the importance of what he said. Not only now are we learning and developing as human beings, we have the likes of artificial intelligence. And if we look at what that is, it's self-learning technology. So why do we stop learning? Why do we stop educating ourselves? Cultural integration is increasing so rapidly, and I think that we ourselves need to become aware of this. Most people grow up with celebrities being their role models. To me, it's my dad. He himself has faced diversity within education. He moved from Portugal to South Africa at the age of 7, unable to speak a word of English. He taught himself English and went on to be very successful in his education. But when he came to go into university, he was offered the chance to study at a very prestigious tech school in America, but could not do so due to lack of funding. And when I found this out, I thought, really? We go to university, we can take out a student loan? And it baffled me, because under the Human Rights Act, we all have the right to education. But what does this mean? Well, it means that each individual in the UK from the ages of 4 to 18 can go and receive education for free. And then, if you choose to, you can go to university on a student loan, should you choose to do so. A recent article stated to me that fees were a barrier to people who wanted to go into further education and higher education. And looking into this, that is true. On average, for the legal profession, it costs £27,500. But that's forgetting a maintenance loan, as well as the cost of the qualifying solicitor's exam or barrister exams. 27% of people from ethnic minority backgrounds felt that their ethnicity was a barrier to such a profession. And I myself kind of sat and thought, you know what, that's a very high percentage. And knowing your rights here is highly important. Under the Equality Act of 2010, everybody is protected for equal pay and equal opportunity. The Act protects characteristics such as sex, gender, religion, race, just to name a few. And equal opportunity allows for any job that you apply for you to be treated fairly without judgments based on stereotypes. I have seen this difference from when I first applied for a part-time job where there was no equal opportunity form to applying now for recent placements where there is that equal opportunity form. And you know what? I think it really is highlighting to me that the law is progressing and society is progressing as well. Despite the legal profession, for example, being associated typically with white middle-aged men, there is evidence that this is changing. A recent statistic highlighted to me that 52% of mid-sized law firms are female workers. Whilst this may seem like a big difference, it still needs more. 1 in 5 lawyers in the UK come from the BAME group, and this has also increased. So it's showing that in just the 10 years since this act has been implemented, there is a change. And this is why you need to know your rights. Diversity within a workforce is so beneficial. It allows for people who, say, are coming back from long-term sick leave to work from home to integrate themselves back in. It allows for women who feel that they might be prevented from going for a job or losing their job because of a family life. It doesn't exist. It allows for a more efficient workforce. It promotes fairness amongst all, and it creates this environment that everybody wants to work in. I myself have always been wary of the fact that when I have a career, I may have to potentially choose between a family life or a career. And knowing my rights now, I know I don't actually have to do that. Going back to what my dad said, the world never stops learning, so why should we? If we start learning from a very, very young age that diversity is just society, there'll no longer be this stigma attached to it. It'll just simply be the norm in society. In life, almost all of us go through education, employment, family life, and some may experience vulnerability. If you start learning now, it'll help you for your future. This is why you need to know your rights.